watching in the battle, yeah. Say what you want about me, yeah, but I'm a living in the green world, and I need the air to breathe. Some will say you gotta get your kicks by removing love from a natural chip. But metal will rust and money will burn, yeah. And on the final page I ask, were you living in the green world? And did you give some in return?
Here we are right now at the Ripplebrook Ranger Station. We're going to go check out 2 units today, both part of the Oak Grove timber sale. You have this group of things that I put together. These should all be animals or plants that we should be able to find today. If you do find them, if it's a small thing, you should just bring it with us, and then we'll talk about them when we stop for a short spell. If it's something that you can't take, maybe you can just stop everyone and we can point it out and talk about it real quick. Oak Grove timber sale is about 3,000 acres of forest in all part of the Oak Grove watershed. So we'll check out 2 of the couple hundred units. Is it over 100?
I haven't actually counted them, but I would say it's 100.
Okay, so the tendency these days is not to choose a large area to just clear cut, but to thin over a vast area and pull out generally the same amount of raw timber material. So as far as we'll be talking today a little bit about some of the repercussions of that, and at any point, if anyone has something to chime in and say, or if something I say doesn't make sense, or you'd like more clarification, just ask, all right? I just love being out in the forest, and what I've spent my time doing is just sort of educating myself about, generally, what I've spent my time learning about is wild edibles. So that'll be one of the focuses today. If you have anything to chime in or point out, that would be awesome. Actually, on the last page of the packet I handed out, there's space for 3 things that maybe you spotted that aren't on this list. 3 interesting plants or mushrooms or animals that you'd like to talk about or just point out to the group. As far as other things I think we should probably bring, I love mushroom hunting. This is one of the best starter books. If anyone's feeling courageous and wants to bring this along, I think it would be a good addition to our library. Anyone? Check out the couple of mushrooms that we might spot today in your packet. They are the belly button hedgehog. Just kind of a funky name for a mushroom. Super tasty. One of my favorite mushrooms. I enjoy them more than chanterelles. Then we'll probably see some yellowfoot, which are in the chanterelle family, though don't look for chanterelles because you'll be surprised. They're very teeny tiny. Same classic trumpet shape, a little bit darker brown, a burnt orange color. The same prehistoric gills. What I mean by that is they've got blunted edges instead of deep gills that you'd see on a normal underside of a mushroom cap. The last one you might see are sulfur tufts. Don't eat those, but they're very pretty, so hopefully we can spot some today. And you'll be our mushroom expert, okay? And sorry, it's...
Well, you my dad. Christina.
Okay. Last one, I think we should probably bring plants. I love this book. This is my favorite edible and medicinal. I don't really spend a lot of time exploring the medicinal uses of plants for a variety of reasons. Not because I don't think it doesn't work, but generally I'm more interested in the food culture behind it. Can someone bring this one along and be sort of the plant expert? Anyone?
I'll take a look.
All right.
If you want to bring any of the rest of those, I can make room in my backpack, definitely.
I think that's a pretty good spectrum of resources. I'd just like to have those along so we can, so if anyone stumps me, then I can say, whoa, let's look at the book. I'd be interested to see what it's... of course, I know the answer, but let's get it from the source. I've been teaching for lots of years, not this. I've been teaching something else for lots of years, and I always like to get a good sense of what people want to get out of an engagement. So maybe you could just pop around in a circle and say your name and maybe what you're hoping to get out of the day, and that way we can be sure to cover everyone's interests. Grady, how about you, buddy? What do you want to get out of today?
I want to get out today. Well, I'm really excited to see just this beautiful weather today. I'm carrying binoculars, so I would like to see some birds.
Well, what do you want?
Bella is here because she wants to be out in the woods and she hopes to see some critters and some snow. And I'm here with Bella.
I'm Christina, and I wanted to get out in the woods today and also learn about more about our this amazing ecosystem we have out here. And I'd love to see some mushrooms. Being that I'm the supposed mushroom expert today.
You're gonna learn and teach.
Yes.
My name's Liam, and I just wanted to get out of the city, get out in the woods for a day. I like being out in the nature. So.
I'm Camilo, and I just wanted to get out of the house and be around some people. And I also appreciate Bark's political mission, and I think it's good for us to be advocates as well as observers here.
I'm James, and excited to learn more about these edibles. Appreciate you providing this documentation.
I'm Trevor, and I'm just looking for an excuse to be out in the woods.
What do you want?
I want to get going.
At the end of the day, I'll try to make some time to talk about things you can do to help Bark out. Bark's a pretty cool program, all in all. They're doing good work. There's a lot of discrepancies between sort of the preparation and documentation of the done by the Forest Service and then the actual on-ground activities of timber companies. So Bark does a good job of monitoring and just checking to make sure that things are going in a as environmentally sound of a way as possible.
This sale is pre-scoping, which means it could change a bit when they send out the official scoping letter. And so basically what the scoping means is that's just a period when they release a map, and they'll release just like the 5 or 6 reasons why they want to log in that area, and then you have 30 days to provide some kind of comments on that. And that period of time is just around the corner. So we'll do a little bit of of what Bark tries to encourage is getting the public involved in their own private, in public lands by writing some comments and just seeing how we feel about it as we kind of walk around and see some of the planting area today. But that said, this is pre-scoping. This is just one little map we got, and the project could change a little bit between now and when it's official, if you will.
But we are in public comment period then.
No, we're not. It's what's called pre-scoping. We just basically got a map. This is it's just around the corner. The scoping comment period was supposed to begin in February, so it should be any day now.
We're going to be going through some fairly tame forest right off the bat. Actually, when Grady and I were up here last time, I was getting a bit of a sulk on as we were hiking through this section. But it'll be good to make some points about the current health of some of our forests and what happens when some of these tree plantations turn into mature forest. You'll have a good idea of what I mean by that once we get up there, and we'll see a boundary between a fairly unhealthy forest and a healthy, slightly older forest.
1, 2.
So any plant with the word wart in it basically means has been used historically as medicine. So St. John's wort, like all of these blah, 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 wort, all of those have traditionally been used as medicine. Now with this one, and why I put suspect along with the medical uses of it, is that it was called lungwort because it looks like lung tissue. So people are like, hey, this lichen, it sort of looks like someone's lungs from our experience. And that doesn't seem very scientific to me as far as medicine goes. So it, especially since people have decided that this should be used in treating lung ailments. So it's kind of a stretch. I don't know if it's medically if it has any value, but certainly as an orange dye, it would be good. You'd probably just boil it down, add the right mordant. Anyone else grab any other bits or bobs? This is old man's beard. I forget the Latin name, but it's on there somewhere. What was it?
It was one of the first ones.
Yeah, so Usnea, basically a family, like a prospecting family or a homesteading family, would bring down 3 or 4 trees covered in Usnea, not necessarily Usnea, any of the hair lichens. And some of them are more edible than others. Some of them are very bitter, though. And then 3 or 4 trees for a family would get about a year's worth of lichen out of it. You boil the stuff down over hours, and it turns into this gelatinous mass. And when cooled, you can just slice it up like a big jelly cake, and it actually has quite a lot of nutritional value. I've never gone as far as collecting a large bucket of it and boiling it down, but hey, one day. So yeah, there are 2 things off of our list. So we're going to be walking through an area that is intended to be thinned. We don't know why this area was picked. Generally, Grady and I were talking about it being likely that they want to thin this forest down in the case of a forest fire that would potentially damage a lot of the infrastructure we've seen so far on the White. But keep your eyes peeled. Basically, this is classic tree plantation forest right here. This is just very homogeneous, and yeah. Oh,
You're saying it was logged already, and this is the plantation that they planted.
this is it was logged already, and this is the plantation that was. It actually, to me, it looks like it's been thinned already. So yeah, it's curious. I don't see this as being a huge fire hazard, but it's not as dense as a lot of other young plantation forests I've seen. But
Is
anyway.
it healthy?
Well, that's a really good question. That's hard to answer. Is it healthy? So, a healthy forest could be a lot of different things. You take like a beautiful old growth forest. Is it healthy because it's an old growth? I mean, basically you have trees that are so big they kill all other plant life. So it's not as diverse as some younger forests. Is it healthy? Keep your eyes peeled. I would be interested to hear people's observations as we walk up there. What we'll see is we'll get to an edge of an older forest and that hasn't been logged in the same way as this, so you can have a look. I think intuitively I would say that this isn't the healthiest forest I've ever seen, but I'm basing that on generally a feeling like I don't see a lot of biodiversity in here. But as I said, with old growth, you wouldn't see that generally either. So it's really hard to say. Is it biomass? Is it diversity? But keep your eyes peeled and see what you see, and then we'll talk about that up at the top of the.
Does the proximity to all these hydrocarbons have anything to do with that?
Well,
Awful lot of cars go by here.
I wouldn't say the number of cars would have a huge effect on it. I don't see a lot of traffic on this road, but certainly a lot of other aspects. This area has a lot of man-made structures. You also notice all of the buildings that we're going to be passing today have to have power. So the power lines that have been cut through the forest have created a sort of natural pathway for invasives to crowd in and start pushing boundaries. So, okay, so these are cat's tongue. It's a tooth fungus, which means it doesn't propagate through spores that come out of gills, but spores that come off of these teeth. Cool. They're really cool. You can actually put them in a bowl with cream and sugar, and oh yeah, they're good. Not a bad edible. Can be eaten raw. Sort of tasteless, but good. Anyone feeling brave?
I'll try a little bit. Anybody else want to share?
Another one on the ground.
Basically, it's like eating Jell-O, and the reason you put sugar and cream in it is because it doesn't taste like anything.
But there are nutrients in it?
Oh yeah, mushrooms. A lot of people say, and I've heard this before, I used to believe it. People say, oh, mushrooms have very little nutritional value. Yeah, I mean, it's a food. It's the Mycological Society put together a nutritional fact sheet, and yeah, you'll see, especially for some of the smaller minerals and vitamins, they're very nutritious. These are belly button hedgehogs. Again, they're a tooth fungus, so they've got teeth on the bottom instead of gills. It makes them very easy to identify. This is probably, I just squished that one up to all. Okay, so this is probably one of the best beginner mushrooms. If you're interested in it, start with hedgehogs. You can see that the bottom has no gills, it's all teeth. The family is very small around these parts, so you're not going to get easily confused, and super tasty. Anyone want to take this? I expect we'll find many more of these today. See, once you get we call it getting your eyes on. Once you see how it looks down there in the moss, you should be able to see them sort of pop up around you. In fact, whenever I find a mushroom, I generally get down, I don't pick it, just look around, and if I don't see 3 or 4 more very close to me, then I'm surprised. Usually they just pop out. Anyone? All right.
So do some mushrooms make it past the freezes and some don't, or?
Hedgehogs are super hardy, so they can be under snow. I generally cook them before, but that's fine. Don't worry about that. They're way better cooked. It's basically like eating nothing versus eating super primo. They cook up very meaty. They're beautiful. Oh, but yeah, back to talking about the frost. I've found hedgehogs growing under snow. I've seen like just a piece of one, and then digging under the snow, I've found heaps of them. And they freeze, and then they thaw out, and they're generally fine.
So they come up before the snow, and then they
just live under it, or do the best they can. Chanterelles will start dying off at the first frost, so that's an example of a mushroom that wouldn't be as hardy. But I used to eat this in Japan all the time. They're actually, I believe, the people who studied and found that it causes some types of stomach cancer, which sucks, but the fiddleheads in the springtime are very tasty, so I'll cook them up. Everything in moderation. You smoke cigarettes, eat a fiddlehead. Give me a break. They're also super useful. The bracken stems, when they're not so wasted like this, can be spun and turned into twine. It's very, very strong. Does anyone know Andrew Goldsworthy?
Yeah.
He's a nature artist. He makes sculptures, but he displays them in photography. He uses bracken because of how hardy it is. All of his stuff is supposed to be transient. It's supposed to go from existing to falling apart to non-existing, and that's part of his philosophy. But at the same time, he doesn't want to make something that's going to instantly fall to pieces. So he uses a lot of bracken. You'll see him pulling bracken stems and pushing them together in these intricate patterns, making sort of spiderweb appearing quilts along the forest, and pushing blackthorns in between them. Definitely feel it a lot more once we actually get in here. Immediately, I'm seeing birds. Do you notice this? Mm-hmm. So, like, immediately something's happening here. This is an edge, right? Yeah. And we've got something happening in this forest that I'm not particularly keen on, and something else happening at this forest. Also, generally speaking, you'll see more animal life on the edges of places. Animals that enjoy something for cover. Wow, they're really flying around back there. Enjoy something for cover, something for feeding, or vice versa. Earlier, Camilo asked about sort of, is that a healthy forest? And it's kind of hard to answer that question. But what you'll find is, generally with thinning projects, what you have is a problematic forest, a mismanaged forest in the first place. It's too dense, and the trees are too close to each other. Also, it's sort of a monoculture. It's like, here's Doug fir, and we're just going to plant Doug fir because that's a great tree for the timber industry. So that's one problem. When you get to the thinning aspect of it, you have people coming through to pull out about 60% of the trees that exist in a certain part of the forest. So some of the drawbacks of that, it creates a better space, so trees can, with more space, trees can grow bigger and we can get old growth faster. But what you're basically doing is you're taking all of those resources that eventually through natural selection are going to die, fall over, and make snags. And you're pulling that all out of the forest, so basically all you have are healthy trees and no biomass laying down, creating habitat for animals, woodpeckers, all sorts of things. So it's really not as clear cut as that. If someone were going to go through and thin, if they just thinned with a chainsaw and left it there, that's one thing. But commercial thinning is not as environmentally sound as it's made out to be. When you have a plantation type forest that slowly over time naturally matures, it's going to have a lot more variety in what I mean by that is sort of this edge thing right here. You know, we've got kind of an open area of mostly deciduous trees, and we've got mostly fir and pine in here. The diversity happens naturally over an extended period of time. So basically that's what we're looking for. We're looking for diversity in the environment and in species. So that just doesn't happen with thinning projects over time. It's basically you have dug fir evenly spaced to grow as quickly as possible. That's not always the best way to go about it. So if you hear people talking about thinning as just, that's one of the things Bark's trying to do is sort of not necessarily say thinning is bad, but say you can't just approach thinning altogether and say this is good for the forest, because generally the repercussions of massive thinning over a huge area is going to cause problems with the infrastructure needed to gain access to those points. So I'm sure a lot of people here know that the National Forest Service, I mean, we lose money. Taxpayers are losing maybe $1 billion or more every year with the National Forest Service timber sales. So we sell off plots of land, we sell off access to them, but ultimately the Forestry Service is responsible for building the roads and building access to those locations. Now, if it was a clear-cut area, let's say we're just going to demolish this forest. We build one road, we build it well, we demolish the forest, and that's pretty cheap. But when you have the Oak Grove timber sale is 3,000 acres, and it's 100 plus units. So you have dozens of roads, and each one is going to cost the Forestry Service money, which means it's going to cost us money. So it's just not as financially viable. I'm not suggesting we clear cut or go back to clear cuts, but the point is it's proposed as being this eco-friendly, low-impact approach to cutting down timber, but generally speaking, you're facing reduced economic benefit, and you're facing potentially harder, more challenging problems to track. So I can't tell you much about the 3,000 acres, but what I can tell you is the 3,000 acres for this sale are a part of the Oak Grove watershed. So any sediment that gets washed down is eventually going to join together into the Oak Grove River and into the Clackamas, and then into our Willamette. So these are all kind of food for thoughts. Yeah.
It'll impact spawning salmon, and it'll suffocate them. So it also impacts our salmon population, which we spend a lot of money trying to recover. So it's sort of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting we're paying money to do the roads, but then the roads are harming salmon habitat, which we're also paying money to recover with our tax money. So it's kind of interesting. Shoot yourself.
Actually, we're paying money to decommission. There are different ways to decommission a road, so you can walk away from it, or you can create a big berm in front of it so people can't take their four-wheelers down it, or you can actually churn up the ground, actively decommission it. So we're actually paying heaps of money to decommission roads, to create a better habitat, and then we're opening those roads back up again in 5 or 6 years. I remember back in the day there was this exercise this exercise I did in school, and it was sort of like it was a brilliant exercise. It was basically like, here's some dentistry tools, and all the kids had a chocolate chip cookie, and someone said, get the chocolate chips out of this cookie with these tools. And of course you start and you're like, I'm going to be so good at this, and what you end up with is like a demolished cookie. You can't get the chocolate chips out without breaking the cookie at some point. And that's how my philosophy on these giant thinning projects. It's like, sure, you can take out little pieces of it, but getting access to those little pieces certainly isn't going to work. As far as the health question goes, I'd like to make a list of things like this. Okay, we can't say what a healthy forest is because it's too big and our lives are too short. Salmon. I want to catch salmon, you want to catch salmon. We want a healthy salmon industry. We want maybe we want a healthy timber industry. Maybe that's one of the things on the list. Hunters want game, want abundant game so they can hone their craft and have a fun hobby. Making a list like this of quantifiable things and saying like, okay, let's look at our forest over the next 20 years and see what happens. Let's see that in these places where we thin, we build these large roads, some of which wash out and destroy huge sections of forest. Here's an example right here. This is an old washout. The hillside just slumps off. So seeing how that affects the quantifiable measures of success, I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to be out here just saying like, here's a healthy forest because I say so, here's an unhealthy forest because I say so. I think we're all invested in it, and if we can somehow find a way to link our selfish desires for the forest with our ability to be better stewards to it, I think we'll be better off. I would like it to be scientific. I would like it to be very scientific. And the problem with science is that science can say that thinning is great, so let's thin instead of clear cut, or it can say that commercial thinning is potentially more detrimental than it is beneficial. How would I like it to change? I'd certainly like it to be. I don't see a point of pumping $1 billion into an industry that hurts my favorite hobbies. So we lose money with the National Forest Service timber sales. We just lose money, and there's no way around that. So first off, I'd like to be able to get something out of it. Like I'm not a saint by any means. I think if we were creating jobs, if we were creating a booming economy, unfortunately, what we get in Mount Hood is we have three timber companies bidding on timber sales, and whereas we have scores of workmen coming in to chop down trees, we have mechanized, very small teams using mechanized. Using machines instead of using human labor. So we're not getting. I would like to either make some jobs, I'd like to make some local money, or I would like to have a beautiful forest. And I don't see the first two happening. So I would just like to stop logging national forests. If you're looking for a simple answer, you're like, how would I like it to change? I just like to stop.
Are there other forests that are still being logged? Or?
Private and state forests are also logged. I mean, national forest logging is what, 3% of our...
Yeah, it's 3% of what contributes to the national need. And then, if you consider that private lands and state forests, the majority of that isn't even getting milled here. They're not even processing it here. It's just going raw logs going to China and Japan. So, if you took that away and those were filling the national market, there would be no need for timber up here at all. And so much as Joseph was saying, you get this Forest Service folks that, are pretty ecological minded, and they plan a timber sale and they write this environmental analysis, and it sounds all peachy clean and everything. But then what they do is they give a contract to a private entity who comes out and logs the land. And what happens is so much is lost in the translation. They don't have that, that 6-year degree or that deep ecological knowledge. And so they come out and their motive is to make a buck. So they do a lot of short circuits and get around a lot of these things like protecting snags or, creating adequate riparian buffers and so forth. And then they just take the trees and they get out. And then the Forest Service has to come and clean up. So then our taxpayer money is used again to come in and clean up after the logging company comes in through and does damage. So yeah, we pay for it on both ends, and we give it away, and as Joseph was saying, to a smaller and smaller labor force for a need that's kind of manufactured at this point.
I mean, what you're describing doesn't make sense in the face of it. So there's got to be some political issue that's involved in the way that it's set up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that should be subject to influence.
County governments and schools get their funding from the sale of state forests for timber. So like the Elliott, that's like, I mean, if you check out Cascadia Wilds, has a lot about that, the Clear Cut for Kids. I mean, so that funding is tied directly to clear cutting our forests.
Yeah,
You want money for your schools? You gotta clear cut your forests. So I mean that seems like a very big conflict of interest there, but it's how it's set up right now.
Oregon lumber for Oregonians. If I could say, like, let's keep 90% of it in the state, I feel like no one would want to chop down the forest, because we don't need, I mean, we need lumber for building projects, but we don't need nearly as much as we chop down.
Right.
So that'd be a great way to do it. I just don't like the idea of chopping down trees. This is more state and BLM, but chopping down trees, having a workforce of maybe 15 people, including administrators, and then popping them on trucks and shipping them overseas. I just don't see that creating a lot of economical benefit or security in jobs or anything like that. National Forest Service has to be processed domestically, but then it's okay. So we mill it, and it's even at that point, how many jobs are you creating? How many people does it take to run a lumber mill? Certainly not as many as it used to, and where the big job boom would or should occur is in the final product. Like, what do you make? What are you making with that? What are you building? Are you building houses? Are you creating craft furniture? I mean, that it's a resource, and I think it should be used locally, if at all. Alright, here's licorice fern. Our guinea pig.
How do you tell it from? How do you tell licorice fern from sword fern? They look real similar.
Well,
to a small sword fern.
They look pretty similar, but sword fern is going to be growing right off the ground. Licorice fern generally likes to grow in moss. I normally see it on deciduous trees, but here we're not seeing any. I found this over on. You can see across the way there's a rock with some ferns growing off of it.
Oh no, those are generally
in that moss substrate.
And those are generally licorice ferns.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, all right.
And that root structure is pretty unique. Okay, this one was growing right here at the base of this fallen Doug fir. You see, we've got we don't have, strictly speaking, deep regular gills. We have primitive gills. They're flat and blunt. They're not blade-like. So again, that burnt orange color, bright orange stalk, hollow on the inside. These and eggs, oh man, forget about it. It's beautiful. Okay, so as you pass, I'm gonna put it right here. I want you to look at it and get your eyes on, so you can get that search pattern down, and then the last person, whoever's passing it, pick up that mushroom and throw it in an omelet. The Forestry Service is looking to privatize potentially all public campgrounds. So there's not necessarily a huge problem there, except for the reasoning behind it is a little strange to me, and it's strange for these reasons. First, we say, the Forest Service says we can't afford to maintain campgrounds. They're not financially viable, and we're losing money on them, which is odd considering we're losing, like $1 billion+ a year on timber sales, and no one really questions that. So as soon as campsites start losing money, they get auctioned off to the highest bidder. So that's the first problem, or incongruency at least. Second part is make more money out of campgrounds. Keep them as public, but charge higher fees. It seems pretty straightforward. You can't make an argument to say the Forest Service can't make money off of campgrounds, so we're going to sell them to a private organization that's going to make money off of the campground. There's something in that doesn't work. Right now, are they in a 5-year or a 1-year test period?
Right now, half the campgrounds are in a contract with the private entity, and the other half are on a 1-year category or a 1-year contract, like a trial period. And we're supposed to get environmental assessment this month or next, and that will basically lay the groundwork for giving away the rest of the campgrounds to private entities.
So it's a 5-year lease, and these private companies are basically pumping in loads of resources to create infrastructure. And there's something, we were talking about this a little bit the other day, there's something quite strange and not terribly convincing about a system in which the Forest Service is saying you've got a 5-year contract in which you can pump in as much money as you need to create the infrastructure to make this profitable, but after 5 years, it might all go away. So I don't see a lot of businesses jumping for that opportunity to throw their resources into a 5-year project with no potential payoff. So and maybe I'm being cynical here, but there's something funny going on with that. There's something where we basically bypassed the public process of issuing access and management rights to our public lands, and we're saying, yeah, don't worry about it. It's just a 5-year contract, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if I were those businesses, I feel like there must be some more subtle guarantee of future opportunities. I find it hard to believe that anyone would be that interested in running a campground for 5 years and then walking away from all of their investments. So,
by subtle, you mean backdoor?
I'm wondering if there are sort of wink and smile business practices being done here. It seems so. So I've already mentioned several things that don't make sense to me, like why can't the Forest Service make money out of it when private companies can? So there's something odd happening here. It doesn't make sense. I don't think transparency is not really even an option as far as feeling secure about this right now. It's all very much hidden from the public. We have no access to a lot of the details of these plans, and the whole way the negotiations took place are it seems fairly deliberate to subvert this public process that wouldn't have been wanting to go along with it.
Well, could it be that it has nothing to do with the Forest Service, and it's more like organizations like American Recreation Coalition that is working their wonders and their lobbyists with Congress?
It could entirely be that. But the point is, I mean, all we have now are just a bunch of questions and no forum with which to ask them, and no one who's accountable for answering them. So, it seems highly problematic, and it seems like we're sort of getting the wool pulled over our eyes without even noticing it.
Is this a national or just an Oregon thing? Is it the National Forest or the?
I don't know about it happening on certainly the National Forest Service. So this is these are national public lands. So in that sense, yes, it is national. But I don't know outside of Oregon what's happening. Mm-hmm. What I do know is that most of the campsites that have been made private are being bought up by Californian companies. I know that there's been a lot of bad publicity around the lack of appropriate screening for camp hosts. I know that a dozen have been arrested for dealing drugs. A dozen camp hosts were arrested for dealing drugs at a campsite. Also, there have been lots of problems with people shooting guns in campgrounds and camp hosts without the strict requirements required of sort of a federal program. Camp hosts are just sort of slipping in under really low bars.
You mean stewards or whatever?
Yeah. So whoever's the campground host, whoever is running that particular campground. I also know that recently someone did a lot of background checks on camp hosts and found several people with previous felonies. In sort of previous legal red flags that might not make them the best candidates for maintaining a campground and making sure it's safe for people. So we've got that potentially to look forward to. So there might be some opportunities to get involved with that. We'll talk about that at the end of the day, hopefully.
What happened with Bagby? I never heard.
Well, Bagby, as far as I understood, they pulled it out of the offer. So Bagby was basically a part of this. Wasn't it part of the big contract to say, like, you get access to these certain places? Bagby's one of them. It was kind of the cash cow of the lot. It was the best item on there because obviously they could probably pull in a great deal of revenue. But I think the community got behind sort of lobbying to get it pulled out. At least that part of it pulled out. So I think Bagby didn't get included on the sale. It's still private as far as I know. Though I'm sure there are whispers of it always being included on one of the private bids. If the mushroom has gills, radiating blades. If the mushroom lacks gills. So does the mushroom have gills?
Yeah.
Okay, so it has gills. So we move on. If the mature gills are white, pinkish, or yellow, not brown or black. White, pinkish, or yellow. And if the young mushroom is encased by a veil. Be very careful with the words and or. And or are not synonymous. It'll say and if it means it has to have both. Okay, and if the young mushroom has a veil. Encased by a veil is a little sac at the bottom of the mushroom. I didn't do a very good job of pulling this one out, but presumably you might be able to tell that it didn't. Whenever you pull up a mushroom, make sure that you get well into the soil so you can reveal all of it. So it does not have a veil. So if there is no veil covering the young gills, or if there is only a thin veil that quickly disappears and does not form a ring on the stalk, yes. Okay, so no veil, so now there's no ring on the stem of this, right? Okay. So we're going to move over here now. If the mushroom is brittle and the stalk snaps open cleanly like a piece of chalk when broken, and in some cases exudes a milk or juice when cut. Okay, so now I have to decide, does it snap like a piece of chalk?
No.
Okay, so it's probably more likely this if the stalk does not snap open cleanly, i.e. if it shows at least some fibers when broken. So there are fibers. And does not exude a milk or juice when cut. Okay, so now here we are. If the spores are white, pinkish, yellowish, or lilac tinged, and mature gills are usually pale or brightly colored. Spores. Ooh, now we're getting into spore color, which seems like, how in the world would I know? Has anyone taken a spore print before? Okay, so what you'd do is you'd get a mature mushroom, you'd put it on a white or black or both piece of paper, and you leave it with a bowl or a cup over the top for an hour, maybe 2 hours. What you'll get at the end of that is a fine powder in the shape of the underside of the mushroom. That powder is the spore, and what you can get is a fairly accurate idea of the color of the spores. It sounds more difficult than it is. Try it, and it's fun to just make prints like that. Okay, so very, very basically, you can tell the color of a spore by how dark or light the gills are. So I'm going to go ahead and say the spores of this are not super dark because the underside isn't super, super dark. But don't use that as a general rule. Finally, if the gills are primitive, fairly thick, blunt, and usually forked or connected by cross veins, and they run down the stalk.
No.
Primitive, fairly thick, blunt, and usually forked. Can you see if they're forked?
Yeah, they look forked.
Okay, they're forked or connected by cross veins.
No.
So here's an example right here. So here's straight gills, and here are gills that interconnect with cross veins. That's sort of what we're looking for. So that's giving us chanterelles, and that's where you start. That's how you get into the family. Now, as far as using this book, basically it's got, a handful of pages. You could just memorize what's in here and say, oh yeah, I think I've seen that before. You'll get to a detail page. This detail page, we think, yeah, that looks pretty similar to what I've got. Now, I don't just stop there and say, like, this picture is similar to the mushroom I have. What I need to do is I need to go through the key features and be able to say yes to every single one of them. So number 1, cap small, less than 2 inches.
Yeah.
Cap dark brown to tan or dull orange. Gills few and widely spaced, running down the stalk.
No.
So they run, when it means running down the stalk, it means it merges into the stalk instead of stopping beforehand. So these do run down the stalk a little bit, but they don't go all the way down the stalk. Don't eat that, we're still using it. Gills thick, shallow, blunt. So they're not knife-like, they're blunt. Stalk slender, orange to yellow. When fresh, stalk hollow. Okay?
Yeah.
Alright, so now we're feeling real confident. What we probably want to do is collect it a couple more times, feel good about identifying it under different situations, and then cooking up a very small amount very, very well. Like, just cook the crap out of it. Eat a little bit, wait 24 hours, cook a little more, wait another 24 hours, and then go crazy, because you probably got a nice edible. And don't force yourself to eat something. Your taste buds are there for a reason. If it's bitter or spicy, any of these are indicating that you probably shouldn't stuff it in your mouth.
Isn't the amount of mushrooms you eat have something to do with its toxicity? So if you eat just a little bit, it could be toxic, and later you eat more. it might create
So
a
it
problem.
that's possible, but it's possible. But I think the type of mushrooms that would cause a reaction like that, where you would pass over a threshold, those are fewer than you'd think. And also, I think generally, once you digest it, you have the toxins in your body. So you would pass those toxins through, and then you'd start with a clean slate. Taste and identifying mushrooms pretty important. Rest assured that you can munch on a mushroom, any mushroom in the forest. Just go nom 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 and taste it, spit it out, and it will not poison you. Toxins are only released through digestion, so it's not juice. If you don't wash your hands, you're not going to poison yourself. You can lick a poisonous mushroom, and as long as no particles get into your stomach, you're going to be fine. So we've got this really nice beaver lodge. We've got one of the den entrances right here. The dogs have been snuffing around at it. The beaver, if they're home, will be up in there kind of taking the winter off. They'll have drug in a bunch of nice wood with them. The dogs are marking. That's not surprising. Here's the lodge right here. Water entrance. The water level would be probably a bit higher at first smelt. So this channel, I'm guessing, would be underwater, and the one of the entrances to the burrow can be found right up here. You'll notice that all of these pieces of wood have been chewed up and sort of placed delicately in a nice pile here, making a pretty nice, cozy winter home.
So basically, they just create a berm, and they're in the middle of it somewhere.
Yeah, generally they use it for. I mean, this can be created to stop water and obviously make something like this. This is not. I don't think this is a stream as much as it is just runoff. So this develops and then probably dries up in the summer. I'm not sure what the significance is of piling all the wood up in a situation in which you don't have to block running water. But certainly it gets that berm structure, like you were saying. So you don't have to pile up a bunch of sticks to make a beaver lodge. Sometimes they'll just burrow into the ground if it makes sense. Why don't we just sort of go around the edge of the pond, see what we see, and have some fun. Sound good?
I'm a lover, not a hater. I'm a lover, not a hater. Can't you see? Can't you see? In my